I'm on it.
What's new, guys? It's Mrs. Klein.
And Mr. Creighton. We're here with your second podcast, The Counter-Reformation and the Impact of the Reformation. After the Reformation, the Catholic Church was down, but certainly not out. Millions of faithful followers remained loyal. They continued to recognize the Pope as their leader and trusted their priests' interpretation of the Bible. But church officials knew that to keep their members and bring Protestants back into the fold, they had to stop the spread of Protestantism. To do that, they had to make some changes.
All right, you guys, I want to remind you that we've got a big idea and some essential questions, and then we'll also go over the vocabulary for you in a second. All right, the big idea for this unit is throughout history, people have challenged the status quo for a variety of reasons. And the first essential question is, at what point do people begin to speak out against authority?
The second question, how do events, religious conflict, divide societies?
Why do people or groups of people challenge the status quo?
Our final essential question, how do people respond to criticism?
All right, you guys, here are the key terms, vocab words that you're going to be responsible for this lesson. They are Counter-Reformation, Council of Trent, heresy, Jesuits, missionaries, and nation states. And don't forget that when you hear this sound, you know you've heard a vocabulary term.
All right, we'll be focusing on reform from within. The main idea, reforms in a new religious order established during the Counter-Reformation helped strengthen Catholicism. The question I want you guys to be thinking about, what were some of the methods used during the Counter-Reformation to stop the spread of Protestantism? The changes the Catholic Church made were part of the movement called the Catholic Reformation, sometimes also called the Counter-Reformation. In this, use of the word counter means against. A meeting of church officials and scholars summoned by the Pope in 1545 was a key element of the movement.
The meeting, which came to be known as the Council of Trent, met for 26 sessions over 18 years, mostly in the northern Italian city of Trent. During that time, the council worked to define Catholic beliefs and practices and to determine how the church needed to change. Council members also sought to clarify how Catholicism differed from Protestantism. For example, while Protestants believed that the Bible could be understood directly by individuals, the church taught that it must be interpreted and understood in light of tradition.
To make sure Catholics didn't stray from their faith, the church also established a Roman Inquisition. Like the Spanish Inquisition discussed in the previous chapter, the Roman Inquisition used harsh methods, including torture, to force confession and punish heresy, or a denial of church teachings. Protestants were, of course, considered to be guilty of heresy.
In addition, church officials created a list of books they objected to. Followers of Catholicism were forbidden to read the books, which included Bibles in the vernacular, as well as most anything written by Luther, Calvin, and somebody else called Erasmus. The books were collected by church clergy and burned.
On the other hand, the church also applied gentler methods to broaden its appeal. It built new, larger churches to hold more worshipers. In addition, priests sometimes delivered sermons in the vernacular.
So at least people are able to understand what it is that's being said to them while they're in church.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, now here's some information about a new religious order. The struggle to revive Catholicism was aided by the development of a new religious order called the Society of Jesus, whose followers were known as Jesuits. A former Spanish knight named Ignatius of Loyola formed the order, and he insisted on strict obedience.
Beginning in 1540, Ignatius commanded his followers as their superior general, and the Jesuits carried out their duties with great discipline. They also took vows of poverty and obedience, promising to fight for the greater glory of God.
From the start, the Jesuits' purpose was to obey the Pope and go wherever he thought they were most needed. In time, this meant establishing schools and universities throughout Europe and the world. The Jesuits provided a good education to thousands of men and inspired many to dedicate their lives to the church.
The Jesuits also worked as missionaries by spreading Catholicism to people in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. To prepare for this task and enable them to communicate their faith to people in other parts of the world, Jesuit priests studied many different languages.
Through their support of the Counter-Reformation, the Jesuits and other Catholic reformers helped revitalize the church. By the end of the 1500s, the church had regained much of its power. The church was ready to play an important role in the coming century. All right, you guys, you should be able to answer this question. Why was it important to the Catholic Church to establish its own schools and universities?
All right, guys, our next section is the impact of the Reformation. The Reformation resulted in a cultural shift. Once people could interpret the Bible for themselves, they formed new ideas about the Christian religion. More Protestant denominations formed as differences in beliefs developed, and new Protestant churches sprang up. Europe would never be the same. So the main idea for what we're going to be talking about from here on out is the Reformation had a long-lasting religious, social, and political impact on Europe.
All right, you guys be thinking about this question as you're listening along. What were some of the religious effects of the Reformation? Okay, Protestantism flourished. Like Catholics, Protestants founded universities and parish schools to teach their beliefs and gain new followers. As a result, because both Protestants and Catholics wanted to read the Bible, the Reformation increased literacy.
In England, many Anglicans learned to read the Bible, but not in the vernacular. They followed the Catholic belief that prohibited reading the Bible in translation. However, reformer William Tyndale believed that Anglicans should reject all Catholic beliefs and practices, and so began to prepare an English translation of the New Testament. Tyndale completed his work in Germany. In time, however, Catholic officials there arrested and executed him for his beliefs.
Wow. Here's some information on political effects. The Reformation had both positive and negative political effects. On the positive side, the Reformation influenced the development of democracy and federalism. Protestants who formed a church sometimes governed it themselves. This practice would later encourage religious groups immigrating to the English colonies to form a government with equal and fair laws, an early step toward democracy. In addition, Calvinist churches sometimes allowed church members to share power with the clergy. This practice represented an early form of federalism in which power is shared, like that between a national government and state governments.
On the negative side, the Reformation led to widespread warfare in Europe. In the years after Luther published the 95 Theses, religious wars erupted within countries and between them. The 30 Years' War, for example, started as a conflict between Catholics and Protestants in Central Europe. The war, which lasted from 1618 to 1648, devastated the German states, killing an estimated 7 million people.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
That is.
Although the Catholic Church had partly recovered from the Reformation, its power in Europe would come to be challenged by powerful kings. These kings worked to bring all of the people within their territory under a unified rule. As a result, powerful modern nation-states began to emerge with their own independent governments and populations united by a shared culture, language, and national pride.
The Catholic Church would also face challenges from another source. Scientists influenced by humanism would begin to question accepted views, including those of the Church. Their discoveries would change the way people looked at the world. The question you guys should be able to answer right now: what led to the rise of nation-states?
Okay, you guys, don't forget that we're going to have that vocabulary podcast quiz. The words that you are responsible for this time are Counter-Reformation, Council of Trent, heresy, Jesuits, missionaries, and nation-states. All right, guys, sleep well.
Don't forget,